So I've decided to put this video together because the content that we've been putting out and a lot of the white pill content might be a little bit difficult for people to digest and comprehend. And I think a lot of this is because a lot of our preconceived ideas and beliefs around certain things are blocking people from looking at things from another angle. And so they're stuck on old beliefs and paradigms that they can't really absorb the information being provided. Essentially, I just want to explain our perspective of where we're coming from and how we're seeing things, how we got to the conclusions we got to. And that way, the content that Annette on the white pill is putting out there, you'll be able to relate to a bit better because you know the angle of thought that we're coming from. I also want to clarify that what I know today and what Annette knows today is subject to changing or evolving in the future because we're constantly finding new information and adding on to what we already know. And so there may be things that we've said or thought in the past that we've evolved from. And there's definitely room for growth and for exploration based on the concepts that I'm going to explain and the symbolism. So always keep your mind open to expanding. Okay. With this information, I feel that it's really important to identify the foundations of where we're coming from. What I'm trying to say is that in order to understand the more deeper advanced stuff, you need to have the basic concepts identified. I like to use this as an example. When you go to university, I've done 2 university degrees, so there are certain subjects that you can't do unless you've done the prerequisites. Because if you jumped straight to that subject without doing the prerequisites, you're not going to understand any of it. It's just going to go over your head because you haven't got the basic foundations. For example, advanced biomechanics, it's like you skip the basic and intermediary and then you go straight to advanced. And you'd be sitting there like, what language is this? So as a prerequisite, you have to do the basic first and then the intermediary, and then you'll understand the advanced. So the things we've been taught in society is designed to disrupt our foundational basic understanding so that when it comes to the advanced, deeper stuff, we don't get it because we don't even have the foundations right. And some of the things that I'm referring to include religion, include our understanding of the human body, our understanding of Earth, what this is, planets. So if you're someone who takes all religion literally, as in like actual stories that literally happened, you're straight away blocked from understanding this information because it's all allegorical. And this is where syncretism fits into it because syncretism is all about looking at all the religions, philosophies, mythologies, and making sure they all line up. It's kind of like the zeitgeist, even though, in my opinion, the zeitgeist is not 100% onto it. It's on the right path where, for example, Jesus represents and is the same as Dionysus in Greek mythology, as Horus in ancient Egyptian mythology, or Krishna in Hinduism. So a lot of these ancient mythologies and religions are just repeating the same stories with different characters because it's all symbolizing the macrocosm and the microcosm and what we can do, what we can achieve, what this is. And with syncretism, it all needs to fit. So when you crack a code, it has to be applied to all the mythologies, for example, all the religions, it has to all fit. There can't be one that's out that doesn't make sense. And it also includes astrology too. So it's basically working out the esoteric meaning of things. And a lot of people have done this. Santos Bonacci is a big one who has really done a lot of work around this. And same as I think I don't know his name, Embodiment Celestial or Celestial Embodiment. He wrote the Book of Wisdom. He talks about it too. Another person is George W. Carey, who wrote this book. Okay. But the thing is, yes, they've set a really good foundation in understanding these connections, but they've all had things wrong. This is what Annette talks about. And she shows why it doesn't add up and where it actually really does fit. And she makes it really clear that no one has all the answers. There is no book, there is no person that you can follow or look at that's going to give everything there to you. And that's our job to do the work, to work out what's actually right, what fits and what doesn't. And Annette is on that path at the moment. So basically, whenever people ask, what can I look at? What can I research? What can I read? You have to take everything with a grain of salt. Don't approach a certain author, a certain speaker, and hold them on a pedestal and think that everything they say is right, because there is always room for human error. And what I believe is that it all comes down to how open the heart is and how much you've been able to shut off the dualistic aspect of the heart. And this is what Annette gets really deep into. And there is a podcast we did about the heart, if you want to watch that and understand that. As I was saying, if you take religion literally, you will be blocked off from understanding, digesting, and comprehending this, because there will be blockages around fear, about chakras being evil, or it's devil worship, or witchcraft, or it's very blasphemous to deny that Jesus died for your sins. There's a lot of these things where there's instant blockages for people to explore further. And you're definitely going to really react to a lot of this information and get triggered. And I understand that. I totally understand that. But you don't have to fully discard your beliefs. You don't have to fully change your religion or change your ideologies or whatever. The key is being able to suspend what you believe whilst you look into other possibilities, other things that may actually make more sense to you. The truth resonates. So that's the key. There's so much that I'm suspending at the moment that I don't subscribe to because I'm still exploring, and that's okay. I don't need to have set beliefs and to identify as it, or be a flat earther or be this or be that. I don't need to do that. So I'm happy to suspend things and look into it further until I feel that I've found enough correlations and enough things that fit and make sense. It needs to make sense. It needs to fit. If it doesn't, if there's blind faith where, oh, Jesus did this because just because, like, don't ask questions, or God did that because just don't ask questions, like, it doesn't make sense, but just don't ask questions, that's blind faith. And to me, the truth is whole and complete. And yes, we will never know the truth fully, but if we can work out what this is, why we're here, what we're doing here, then that really does help us narrow down our priorities and our goals. And this fits into the next thing that I want to also mention as a foundation and prerequisite is that if you're not open to the simulation theory, again, this is going to be really hard for you to digest and look into, because you've shut yourself off at that point as well. And I've found that a lot of people, they don't subscribe to the simulation theory, and that's cool. Maybe it's not, but so far, that's adding up with the syncretism. And that's what's making sense. But I also want to highlight that even though it's a simulation theory that we're working with here, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're nothing and we're unimportant and this is a game. No, not at all. In fact, it's the opposite. And I think a few people have that perception of simulation theory, which is why they reject it, because it's quite depressing. What's the point? We're just what, in a video game type mentality. And it's not like that at all. In actual fact, and I want to start getting into the actual information now. What we've, and I should say Annette, because she's pieced a lot of this together. I've only contributed to a little bit, and then we've had the group that have also added to a lot of this too. But what Annette has been able to work out through syncretism and using and this is another thing that I need to say as a prerequisite foundational information, is that movies and TV shows and songs, like all the media stuff, is also part of showing the symbolism and a lot of the secrets that we're seeing in religion, that we're seeing in the mythologies. And media and movies, especially when you can decode movies, it's part of syncretism as well. So I know this is going to upset a lot of people, but basically, religious texts and movies fit into the same category in the sense where they're all at a deeper level and deeper layer, giving insights and hints and secrets away in the symbolism in all of this, in all of what's being shown and what's being said. And again, don't take the movies literally because it's all symbolic about the macrocosm and the microcosm. So it's a combination of things where what's happening on the earth also happens in our bodies at a microcosm level. And someone who's really good at explaining this is Kelly Marie Kerr. She's got a YouTube channel. She's got a lot of followers and she has a lot of views on her videos. And she explains this a lot. If you want to wrap your head around the whole macrocosm, microcosm thing, that's also really good to listen to. Santos Bonacci had a lot of good stuff about this as well, where he actually links astrology to the microcosm, to our body. And Annette talks about this as well in a few of our podcasts, where she brings up the Last Supper and talks about what each of those disciples represent. Annette grew up in a Christian family and she grew up with all the stories, with all the biblical messages and stuff. So she understands that aspect of things very well. So, yeah, going back to the macrocosm and the microcosm and simulation theory, what we at this point believe is that this world is governed by Saturn. Like a lot of truthers know this already, and they talk about how Saturn is the planet that the Cabal or whoever used to control us and keep us under a spell, which, yes, to a degree is true. But what Annette and I believe at this stage, and this may change down the track, but it's adding up to a lot of the syncretism and the symbolism, is that our higher selves are stuck in Saturn. And we've come down here because of the duality and because of the free will that we have in this kind of simulation situation to, I suppose, break free. Because when you look at Saturn astrologically, and Annette says this a lot, it's like a parental energy. It's like you need authority. You need someone to tell you what's right or wrong, or someone to keep you accountable and all that kind of stuff because we struggle to keep ourselves accountable. So that's the energy of Saturn. And that's why this realm is very authoritarian based. You know, we've got governments and stuff like that because at a spiritual level, we are like children. A lot of people need those rules and guidelines and being told what's right and wrong because we don't have that self-governance. But the point of being here is to break through that governance and to have self-accountability, to be conscious of all your decisions and be responsible and to have that innate understanding of what's right and what's wrong. You don't need someone outside of you to tell you that or put rules in place to control you because you can't regulate yourself. So that's one of the keys of what we need to work through here. And I think that's why a lot of what we're experiencing at the moment is that tyrannical government pushback and control. And it's just reflecting our shadows collectively when it comes to inner authority. So what I'm trying to say is we think that our souls are trapped in Saturn. And so we've come here into this kind of simulation to work through that and to activate our dormant DNA and open our hearts, open our chakras, open our optic thalamus and connect to our higher self, which is in Saturn, and bring that down here so that we can basically break free of the simulation. And I do believe that the more you're connected to your higher self, you're invisible to them and you become unpredictable. Archaics talks a lot about the simulation stuff, and he does believe that everything is basically controlled by an AI demiurge god. and construct. But he also has mentioned that when you do things out of the program, you become invisible to them. And the AI construct needs to work harder to cater for you and your abilities. And so it doesn't want you there because you're increasing the energy expenditure. So basically, what I see and what I think is that when we have our higher self coming through, because we're working through raising the seed and activating the solar plexus, the heart, the throat chakra, and the third eye, you allow more of your higher self to be able to resonate with what's happening in your body and to come into your body. And so it's like you're no longer really operating in the sim because you're operating from your higher self. And that's the difference between my perspective on simulation theory and others people's perspective on simulation theory, is where I think that if we can achieve this, we can then basically, we're like a virus, in a program. It's like the Matrix, like we're able to change the course of things and eventually unlock ourselves from Saturn to move up to the next realm where we don't need suffering to learn from or duality and stuff like that. And I think the whole age of Aquarius plays into this, where we're coming out of that age of suffering, that age of pain, and needing to learn from the duality and the suffering. And that's what this is about, our higher selves being able to go to the next level. And Annette believes that's Uranus. So that's a little bit of a summary, and hopefully you guys can understand that. So the next thing is when it comes to the earth and the microcosm and the macrocosm and astrological alignments, they're all linked and connected. So on earth, you have all the different chakras. And Annette talks about this. Solar plexus in Australia, I know for sure. The heart chakra is in Glastonbury. And then there's a few others around the world. If you look it up, you'll find them. I don't want to say them in case I get it wrong because I don't know it off the top of my head. So basically, that there's chakras in the world, and then we have chakras on our body. Based on the syncretism, it's like we're living in a giant clock, and that involves the poles, the pole shift. And this is where globe theory gets a little bit murky when it comes to applying a lot of the syncretism. It doesn't fit. And look, even the flat earth, there are some missing parts to it. But the more I look into it, and this might change for me, and I might get a bit more clarity on this down the track. But it's almost like that the earth is like a torus field, and it's not round, but it's not flat. And it's like, energy is constantly moving up and around. And in the middle, you've got the pole. And underneath the earth is the black sun. And this is one of the biggest hidden secrets, which Annette talks about. And the black sun is dual, and it's part of this reality, this realm. And it represents number 8, because number 8 is like infinity symbol, and it's all about recycling, coming back. That's part of being in the simulation. I mean, we want to get out of that loop. The black sun is also representative of the human heart, which is basically dualistic, which is part of this realm. It's dual. Everything is dual. You have duality, you have suffering and joy and happiness, and there's opposites there. So that's what the black sun represents. So it's dual. The goal here is basically to shut off the unconscious, which is what plays into the negative duality of the heart. And Annette goes into this a lot. I'm pretty sure we go into it in the podcast we did about the heart. So watch that for more context. But basically, the key is to transmute the part of the heart that is dualistic and that can often deceive you. That's the problem. Because the heart is dualistic, the parts that are subconscious and that are in the shadows is the deceiving aspects of the heart. And in Annette's content, especially on Instagram, she shows a lot of series, The Chosen and a few other series, where a lot of this is shown symbolically in what's playing out. It's really, really cool. The connections are pretty amazing. And a lot of it is in religion. And what Annette has been able to come to at this stage is that Christianity and Islam are actually twin flame religions where one represents one aspect and one represents the other aspect. And at this stage, Islam and even Mormons are very focused on the heart. So they're very heart-based religions. I think Christianity is maybe based on the solar plexus. Could be wrong. Have to double check. But yeah, religion and mythology, they have like a theme that they're representing a certain aspect of us and our bodies and chakras or whatever. So I'm trying to make this as simple as possible and hopefully you're still following. But yeah, basically this is where we're at in understanding the earth and the chakras and the astrological alignments as well. We've also used Archaix's research. He's on YouTube, by the way, Archaix, Jason Brashears. So we've used a lot of his research as well to look into the cycles and how we have resets happening and we're basically on a big clock. And that fits in with the flat earth theory where if you look at the theory, it's like every pole shift, the sun and the moon end up shifting, or there's some sort of shift that happens where certain parts of the world become darkened and there's no moon or sun that reaches that area. So they go into like a dark age, whereas certain other parts, when that shift happens, will come back into the sun and the ice will melt. And so basically, we are coming to the end of an age, an end of a cycle. And the black sun, which is underneath the earth, is becoming more powerful, more potent as we get closer to this pole shift. And Annette talks a lot about this, and this relates to the rays, aurora lights, and how that's now reaching other parts of the world, including Australia. It's because it's becoming stronger because we're coming to an end of the cycle, and it represents our own inner flame, so to speak, and how we're becoming more activated because that's the macrocosm and this is the microcosm, and what happens on the macrocosm happens on the microcosm. I hope you're following. And I know a lot of people think that the Northern Lights, it's fake and it's related to geoengineering. Again, that's another belief that you need to suspend. I'm not saying completely sack that, but be open-minded. We are very open-minded to accepting different concepts. We're always changing and growing and we're very flexible, but only if it fits and if it makes sense. Otherwise, we don't fully subscribe to it. We may hold on to it temporarily until something that explains it better indefinitely comes along, if that makes sense. So basically, we're coming to an end of a cycle, and Archaics talks about this. And there is a scene in The Matrix where Neo is in that room with all the TV screens and he's talking to basically the AI god, the AI Demiurge. And there's an interaction there, which Annette actually goes into about what they're saying and what he actually means, and how he says something along the lines of like, this is our sixth time. It's a really interesting scene. But what we got from that is that we've had multiple cycles, and basically we think that this is the sixth attempt of keeping our souls trapped here, whilst our spirit or our higher self is in Saturn. And it's just going to keep repeating itself until we work this out and work out how to activate ourselves and our DNA and basically pass this test of empowering yourself and breaking free of the need to be told what's right or wrong in authority. I'm sure it goes much deeper. This is just like a summary, and there's people out there who probably go more deeper into this. But yeah, we're getting to the end of a cycle where time is running out and we need to start doing the inner work. Otherwise, it resets again. And at the end of the cycle, what happens is as I mentioned, the black sun, it becomes more powerful. And because it's the end of a cycle and the energies increase, and whatever happens to the atmosphere, there are changes there that Archaic talks about. We also activate spiritually as well. And so this helps us work through what we need to work through to activate our dormant DNA and pull through our higher self. So this is what we believe is happening at this stage and why people are having these realizations and certain gifts are coming online, and a lot of Hollywood movies that are based on superpowers and stuff like that. A lot of that's coming out now. And I think that's also a way of white pilling people, a way of showing us what we may start seeing as we get towards an end of an age, or end of this age, as we get towards the end of a cycle. And I also do think a lot of the AI stuff is being pushed to discredit people's gifts coming online and people claiming it's AI generated or whatever. So it's interesting timing. How this all ties into 811, what we believe is that a lot of these rituals are being performed at the macrocosm to symbolize what's not being done, or I should say, what's happening at the microcosm in our bodies. So, a way to simplify that for people is that, let's say for 9/11, for example. So, nine is like the higher self, spirit. And the numbers get a little bit tricky and they tie into it as well. And they represent certain chakra points and stuff like that. And when you have 11, 22, and 33, they're master numbers, so they don't get reduced. You don't do the 2 plus 2 or the 3 plus 3. And so they each represent something as well, which Annette also points out in her content. So if you've watched her content, you may pick up on what 11 is, what 22 and what 33 is. What we believe is happening and what happened with 9/11 is there are rituals being done on the macrocosm, collective level, the earth, to symbolize what's not being achieved or attained in the microcosm within us. So Annette has been able to explain how she's worked out that 9/11 represents the destruction of our connection to our higher self, basically. And that's what 9/11 was about symbolically. Yes, the surface and superficial layer of that was to, give them an excuse to invade Muslim countries and start all this Muslim hate. Yes, it was also to hide money. I know it was something to do with financials. So yes, there are the forefront agendas, but at a deeper level, at the microcosm and macrocosm, that's what it symbolizes. It symbolizes our lack of being able to connect to our higher self and how that's being basically destroyed, or it's instead of going up, we're coming down. And that's what the breaking and the falling of these buildings symbolize. And it's looking at the numbers that are involved. It's looking at the finer details. And she does go into this on her Instagram. So basically, that was 9/11, and that's what 9/11 represented. And if you watch the video we did about 8/11, we include a lot of stuff about 9/11 in there where you can see a lot of the symbology and the numerology too. So where we're at on this realm, it's 7/11. That's what it represents. It's the playing field of duality, which is 7. And this is why there are thousands and thousands of 7/11s around the world. That's also part of the symbolism. It's in our faces. And when you start to understand all of this, you'll start to see all these patterns and things that you didn't notice before. And you start to realize nothing is a coincidence. Everything that's been done, named, at a certain day, at a certain time, or whatever. It's done for a specific purpose, a specific reason. Everything is coded. So basically, we're in 7/11, right? And they don't want us to get out of 7/11. They don't want us to break through 8 and go to 9. So they won't be destroying no 7/11s. They'll be making a lot of 7/11s because this is the concept of this realm. And 8/11 represents the activation of opening the heart, the throat, and the optic thalamus and connecting to your higher self. And that's what 8/11 represents. And that ties into the black sun and a lot of 8 symbolism. And Annette really gets into that in her Instagram stories. So I won't go too deep on that because this is just the basic foundations. But if you want to look into that, and maybe you have already seen her stories, and maybe this might fill in some gaps for you. So that's what 8/11 is about. And they've already done 9/11. So they've already symbolically shown our lack of connection to our higher self and not getting there, not progressing from this realm. So the next thing they needed symbolically to do is this destruction of that connection, opening of the heart, throat, and optic thalamus. And that really goes into how the Twin Towers and the extra building 7 represents that, the three, and how in the city there's buildings that represent that as well, the crown, the other two next to the crown, and how all the numbers fit into that as well. And this is where the revelations fit in, because the revelations and the seven seals tie into what's happening on the microcosm and then on the macrocosm. And so the first seal, which involved the man on the horse with the crown and the bow and arrow, which was about poisoning people's hearts, because the crown represents the heart and the arrow is poison. And symbolically, that was done through the vaccinations. And what happened on the microcosm was people started getting heart issues and heart conditions because of the poison. So we've already had that first seal, so to speak. And that first seal played out because in the microcosm and in the collective, we didn't attain that. So it had to happen external as a ritual. I really hope you guys are following. It's pretty deep. This is just to help you guys understand where we're coming from, and so it's easier for you to digest. And so the second seal, which is the guy on the red horse with the dagger, represents chaos, division, and is all about taking peace from the earth. And I believe it's symbolic of closed hearts and the dualistic aspect of the heart. Because when you think about it, division and chaos comes from those subconscious shadows that people aren't working on, that are being expressed as anger or blame or projection towards other people, other religions, stuff like that. And that's part of the dual aspect of the heart, because we haven't shut off the subconscious and we're letting that subconscious take over. And the subconscious is just our shadows and things that we haven't dealt with, which taint our hearts. And so that's what we're seeing now with this next seal. And this then ties into the 8/11 symbolism and potentially foiling something happening. Annette spoke on that live that we had the other day. And that live, she mentions that because we shone a light on the shadow and the unconscious, we believe that that's why this event didn't go ahead at a grand scale, because that's all it takes is exposing the unconscious and the shadows. Because when you expose it and when you become aware of it, it's no longer subconscious anymore, but now it's in the conscious because you're aware of it and you've shone a light to it. And I think that spreading the word and putting it out there at an energetic level, it did that for people. It triggered people because they became aware of the shadow aspect of themselves. So whether you were triggered or not, you were playing a role in being aware of the subconscious parts of you. And I guess some people are still triggered, but that means that they're aware. It's not in their subconscious anymore because there's a response to it all. And so it's so interesting to see that. And I think this is where the new age stuff gets things misconstrued, where things get pushed into the shadows and the darkness because you have that spiritual bypassing. People don't want to face the negativity. People don't want to face the suffering and pain. And so that's pushed into the subconscious. It's completely ignored. So even though there was fear around this prediction, it doesn't matter because that fear was just people facing the darkness and facing their shadows. And that's really what fear is. It's that lack of understanding around the shadow. It's basically feeling out of control. And even though we didn't want people to be in a state of fear, and we did emphasize not to be afraid, just to be prepared and use this knowledge to your benefit. But the fear also in this situation was part of the revealing of the shadow, because people are seeing things that they don't want to see at a deeper level and they don't understand and they're afraid of. And I think that played a role in it. And I think instead of people projecting the anger towards feeling fear, they need to look inside themselves and ask themselves why they felt that fear. And that's a way to move forward. So, based on the 8/11 situation, this is what we believe has happened because we were able to shine a light on the shadows and of many, many people. Basically, the whole of Sydney knew about this. It spread like wildfire. And when you think about it, awakening that subconscious in people, we feel served to deter the ritual that was going to play out on the macrocosm, which was about people's shadows. And instead of opening the heart and bringing it through and activating the heart, you're actually just falling, it's crumbling. That's the symbolism. So that explains why we think that on 8/11, at a ritual and symbolic side of things, it didn't go ahead because we basically shone a light on everyone's shadows and on the subconscious and unconscious. And there were enough people in the collective who became aware of this for it not to have to play out at the macrocosm. And this is where our theories of this being a simulation, yes, but not being set in stone, no. Because if you can connect to your higher self and activate those dormant parts of ourselves and bring through our higher self and basically become invisible and bring light into this realm, we can change the course of what's been planned. And this is what we think. And, there might be things that might happen or more information we come across that may change that. But so far, and I know Dale also believes this as well, that solipsism is another psyop. And I think that's why people reject simulation theory because of the solipsism aspect of it. This is kind of a summary of it all, and there's probably so much that I've missed, but I really wanted to put this together so that people can digest it easily and understand what their blockages might be or what beliefs and preconceived ideas they may need to suspend if they want to understand and fully grasp the concepts of what Annette is talking about. And I'm not telling people to do that. I'm just saying if you want to understand what she's talking about and you have these preconceived ideas and beliefs, you're going to struggle. So that was the point of making this video, is to hopefully bring you guys onto the same page as us and come from the perspective we're coming from so that you can ponder what's being explained by Annette and you can explore these concepts. And we're definitely not claiming that we have all the answers and we know everything, but we feel that when it comes to syncretism and code cracking and all the symbolism that we're seeing, a lot is really aligning and falling into place. And I I recently gotten interested in the gene keys, and I also see that playing into this a lot. And that's more of the finer details when it comes to DNA activation and the aspects of ourselves that we need to transcend to activate that DNA and to basically connect to our higher self, bring in the new age of Aquarius or whatever, and so that our higher self that is currently in Saturn can ascend or move up into Uranus, which is our current views at the moment. So I hope this really helped. I hope you understand. I hope it helps fill in a lot of question marks and gaps that you may have had in relation to some of Annette's content. If you stayed up until this point, thank you for listening and having an open mind and an open heart. And I look forward to working together on this. Another reason why I wanted to do this is because if we have more people exploring these concepts, and bringing their own skills and knowledge and wisdom to the table. And maybe we can work out a lot more together. So, yeah, it's exciting times. And look, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I will definitely be having Annette on to get more deeper into these concepts. And I think the focus needs to be on the microcosm, on what we're doing with ourselves.